Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, we're going to read a wonderful book by Orison Swett Marden, Why Grow Old? My friend Julia Rogers, who I've interviewed on her podcast, is an example of somebody that can reverse aging. She looks remarkable for her age. And I'm starting to see people all over get younger. It's the coolest thing. I can only say that right now I feel younger than I did when I was younger. When I was in my 20s, I did not feel even close to as good as I feel now. I'm beginning to meet people all over that feel like their faces are younger and their bodies are younger every day because they're changing their thinking. But this is not a new concept. The idea of aging could be simply a pendulum, as Vadim Zeland describes. I've read several chapters of Orison Swett Marden now on the podcast, and he has soon become one of the favorite New Thought authors that I read. He had a bold, definitive headline style in his writing, which really stands out among all of the writers we talk about. Very uplifting, motivational. It's really interesting when you read his story. He started out, first of all, he was adopted and went through like 4 different homes. They kept on kicking him out, and it was a very difficult life for him. This is in 1840s, 1850s. And he changes his job status. He had gone to medical school and he had run hotels, and he changed and decides that he's going to write a book. He writes this big old book, and he was very proud of it. And there was a sudden fire, and he had to run out and abandon this book. But he decided to go back and rewrite the whole thing, and that was Pushing to the Front. I've read several other ones. How to Get What You Want is one of my favorites. This is a booklet, 29 pages, written by Orison Swett Marden, called Why Grow Old, and I found it to be very uplifting and very powerful, a great reminder on the world we're in and the way that we grow old with our attitudes and thoughts. I believe this was written in 1920. Why Grow Old? By Orison Swett Marden. Why grow old? The face cannot betray the years until the mind has given its consent. The mind is the sculptor. We renew our bodies by renewing our thoughts. Change our bodies, our habits, by changing our thoughts. Not long ago, the former secretary to a justice of the New York Supreme Court committed suicide on his 70th birthday. The Statute of Limitations, a brief essay on the Osler theory of life, was found beside the dead body. It read in part, 70. This is the scriptural statute of limitations. After that, active work for man ceases. His time on earth has expired. I am 70, 70, and I am fit only for the chimney corner. This man had dwelt so long on the so-called Osler theory that a man is practically useless and only a burden to himself and the world after 60, and the biblical limitation of life to 70 years and 10, that he made up his mind he would end it all on his 70th birthday. Leaving aside Dr. Osler's theory, there is no doubt that the acceptance in a strictly literal sense of the biblical life limit has proved a decided injury to the race. We are powerfully influenced by our self-imposed limitations and convictions. And it is well known that many people die very near the limit they set for themselves. Even though they are in good health, when this conviction settles upon them. Yet there is no probability that the psalmist had any idea of setting any limit to the life period, so that he had any authority whatever for so doing. Many of the sayings in the Bible, which people take so literally and accept blindly as standards of living, are merely figures of speech used to illustrate an idea. So far as the Bible is concerned, there is just as much reason for setting the life limit at 120 or even at Methuselah's age, 969, as at 70 or 80. There is no evidence in the scriptures that even suggests the existence of an age limit beyond which man was not supposed to or allowed to pass. In fact, the whole spirit of the Bible is to encourage long life through sane and healthful living. It points to the duty of living a useful and noble life, and making as much of ourselves as possible, all of which tends to prolong our years on earth. It would be a reflection upon the Creator to suggest he would limit human life to less than 3 times the age at which it reaches maturity, about 30. When all the analogy of nature, especially in the animal kingdom, points to at least 5 times the length of the maturing period. Should not the highest manifestation of God's creation have a length of life at least equal to that of the animal? Infinite wisdom does not shake the fruit off the tree before it is ripe. We do not half realize what slaves we are to our mental attitudes, what power our convictions have to influence our lives. Multitudes of people undoubtedly shorten their lives by many years because of their deep-seated convictions that they will not live beyond a certain age, the age perhaps at which their parents died. How often we hear this said, "I do not expect to live to be very old. My father and mother died young." Not long ago, a New York man in perfect health told his family that he was certain he should die on his next birthday. On the morning of his birthday, his family alarmed because he refused to go to work, saying that he should certainly die before midnight. Insisted upon calling in the family physician, who examined him and said that there was nothing the matter with him. But the man refused to eat, grew weaker and weaker during the day, and actually died before midnight. The conviction that he was going to die had become so entrenched in his mind that the whole force of his mentality acted to cut off the life force and finally to strangle the life processes. Now, if this man's conviction could have been changed by someone who had sufficient power over him, or if the mental suggestion that he was going to live to a good old age had been implanted in his mind in place of the death idea, he would probably have lived many years longer. If you have convinced yourself, or if the idea has been ingrained into the very structure of your being by your training or the multitudes of examples about you, that you will begin to show the marks of age at about 50, that at 60 you will lose the power of your faculties, your interest in life, that you will become practically useless and have to retire from your business, and that thereafter you will continue to decline until you are cut off entirely. There is no power in the world that can keep the old age processes and signs from developing in you. Thought leads. If it is an old age thought, old age must follow. If it is a youthful thought, a perennial young life thought, a thought of usefulness and helpfulness, the body must correspond. Old age begins in the mind. The expression of age in the body is the harvest of old age ideas, which have been planted in the mind. We see others about our age beginning to decline and show marks of decrepitude, and we imagine it is about time for us to show the same signs. Ultimately, we do show them because we think they are inevitable. But they are only inevitable because of our old age mental attitude and race habit beliefs. If we actually refuse to grow old, if we insist on holding the youthful ideal and the young, hopeful, buoyant thought, the old age earmarks will not show themselves. The elixir of youth lies in the mind or nowhere. You cannot be young by trying to appear so, by dressing youthfully. You must first get rid of the last vestige of thought that you are aging. As long as that is in the mind, cosmetics and youthful dress will amount to very little in changing your appearance. The conviction must first be changed. The thought which has produced the aging condition must be reversed. If we can only establish the perpetual youth mental attitude so that we feel young, we have won half the battle against old age. Be sure of this, that whatever you feel regarding your age will be expressed in your body. It is a great aid to the perpetuation of youth to learn to feel young, however long we may have lived, because the body expresses the habitual feeling, habitual thought. Nothing in the world will make us look young as long as we are convinced that we are aging. Nothing else more effectually retards age than the keeping in mind the bright, cheerful, optimistic, hopeful, buoyant picture of youth in all its splendor, magnificence, the picture of the glories which belong to youth. Youthful dreams, ideals, hopes, and all the qualities which belong to young life. One great trouble with us is that our imaginations age prematurely. The hard, exacting conditions of our modern, strenuous life tend to harden and dry up the brain and nerve cells, and thus seriously injure the power of the imagination, which should be kept fresh, buoyant, elastic. The average routine habit of modern business life tends to destroy the flexibility, the delicacy, the sensitiveness, the exquisite fineness of the perceptive faculties. People who take life too seriously, who seem to think everything depends upon their own individual efforts, whose lives are one continuous grind in living, getting, have a hard expression. Their thought outpictures itself in their faces. These people dry up early in life, becoming wrinkled. Their tissues become as hard as their thought. The arbitrary, domineering, overbearing mind also tends to age the body prematurely, because the thinking is hard, strained, abnormal. People who live on the sunny and beautiful side of life, who cultivate serenity, do not age nearly so rapidly as do those who live on the shady, the dark side. Another reason why so many people age prematurely is because they cease to grow. It is a lamentable fact that multitudes of men seem incapable of receiving or accepting new ideas after they have reached middle age. Many of them, after they have reached the age of 40 or 50, come to a standstill in their mental reaching out. Don't think that you must begin to take in sail to stop growing, stop progressing, just because you've gotten along in years. By this method of reasoning, you will decline rapidly. Never allow yourself to get out of the habit of being young. Do not say that you cannot do this or that as you once did. Live the life that belongs to youth. Do not be afraid of being a boy or girl again in spirit, no matter how many years you have lived. Carry yourself so that you will not suggest old age in any of its phases. Remember, it is the stale mind, the stale mentality, that ages the body. Keep growing. Keep interested in everything about you. It has been shown that the conviction that one is going to die at about a certain time, a certain age, tends to bring about the expected disillusion by strangling the life processes. If you wish to retain your youth, forget unpleasant experiences, disagreeable incidents. A lady 80 years old was recently asked how she managed to keep herself so youthful. She replied, "I know how to forget disagreeable things." No one can remain youthful who does not continue to grow, and no one can keep growing who does not keep alive his interest in the great world about him. We are so constituted that we draw a large part of our nourishment from others. No man can isolate himself, can cut himself off from his fellows without shrinking in his mental stature. The mind that is not constantly reaching out for the new, as well as keeping in touch with the old, soon reaches its limit for growth. Nothing else is easier than for a man to age. All he has to do is to think he is growing old, to expect it, to fear it, and prepare for it, to compare himself with others of the same age who are prematurely old, and to assume that he is like them. To think constantly of the end, to plan for death, to prepare and provide for declining years, is simply to acknowledge that your powers are waning, that you are losing your grip upon life. Such thinking tends to weaken your hold upon the life principle, and your body gradually corresponds with your conviction. The very belief that our powers are waning, the consciousness that we are losing strength, that our vitality is lessening, the conviction that old age is settling upon us, and that our life forces are gradually ebbing away, has a blighting, shriveling influence upon the mental faculties and functions. The whole character deteriorates under this old age belief. The result is that we do not use or develop the age-resisting forces within us. The refreshing, renewing, resisting powers of the body are so reduced and impaired by the conviction that we are getting on in years and cannot stand what we once could, that we become an easy prey to disease and all sorts of physical infirmities. The mental attitude has everything to do with the hastening or the retarding of the old age condition. Dr. Metchnikoff of the Pasteur Institute in Paris says that men should live at least 120 years. There is no doubt that as a race we shorten our lives very materially through our false thinking, our bad living, and our old age convictions. A few years ago, the London Lancet, the highest medical authority in the world, gave a splendid illustration of the power of the mind to keep the body young. A young woman deserted by her lover became insane. She lost all consciousness of the passing of time. She believed her lover would return, and for years she stood daily before her window watching for him. When over 70 years of age, some Americans, including physicians who saw her, thought she was not over 20. She did not have a single gray hair, and no wrinkles or other signs of age were visible. Her skin was as fair and smooth as a young girl's. She did not age because she believed she was still a girl. She did not count her birthdays or worry because she was getting along in years. She was thoroughly convinced that she was still living in the very time that her lover left her. This mental belief controlled her physical condition. She was just as old as she thought she was. Her conviction outpictured itself in her body and kept it youthful. It is an insult to your Creator that your brain should begin to ossify, that your mental powers should begin to decline when you have only reached the half-century milestone. You ought then to be in your youth. What has the appearance of old age to do with youth? What have gray hair, wrinkles, and other evidences of age to do with youth? Mental power should constantly increase. There should be no decline in years. Increasing wisdom and power should be the only signs that you have lived long, that you have been many years on this planet. Strength, beauty, magnificence, superiority, not weaknesses. Uselessness, decrepitude should characterize a man who has lived long. As long as you hold the conviction that you are 60, you will look it. Your thought will outpicture itself in your face, in your whole appearance. If you hold the old age ideal, the old age conviction, your expression must correspond. The body is the bulletin board of the mind. On the other hand, if you think of yourself as perpetually young, vigorous, robust, and buoyant, because every cell in the body is constantly being renewed, decrepitude will not get a hold of you. If you would retain your youth, you must avoid the enemies of youth, and there are no greater enemies than the convictions of age and the gradual loss of interest in things, especially in youthful amusements and in the young life about you. When you are no longer interested in the hopes and ambitions of young people, when you decline to enter into their sports, to romp and play with children, you confess in effect that you are growing old, that you are beginning to harden, that your youthful spirits are drying up, and that the juices of your younger days are evaporating. Nothing helps more to the perpetuation of youth than much association with the young. A man quite advanced in years was asked not long ago how he retained such a youthful appearance in spite of his age. He said that he had been the principal of a high school for over 30 years, that he loved to enter into the life and sports of the young people and to be one of them in their ambitions and interests. This, he said, had kept his mind centered on youth, progress, an abounding life, and the old age thought had no room for entrance. There's not even a suggestion of age in this man's conversation or ideas, and there is a life, a buoyancy about him, which is wonderfully refreshing. There must be a constant activity in the mind that would not age. Keep growing or die is nature's motto, a motto written all over everything in the universe. Hold stoutly to the conviction that it is natural and right for you to remain young. Constantly repeat to yourself that it is wrong, wicked for you to grow old in appearance, that weakness and decrepitude could not have been in the Creator's plan for the man made in His image of perfection, that it must have been acquired, the result of wrong race and individual training and thinking. Constantly affirm, I am always well, always young. I cannot grow old except by producing the old age conditions through my thought. The Creator intended me for continual growth, perpetual advancement, and the betterment, and I am not going to allow myself to be cheated out of my birthright of perennial youth. No matter if people do say to you, you are getting along in years, you are beginning to show signs of age. Just deny these appearances. Say to yourself, principle does not age. Truth does not grow old. I am principle. I am truth. Never go to sleep with the old age picture or thought in your mind. It is of the utmost importance to make yourself feel young at night, to erase all signs, convictions, and feelings of age, to throw aside every care and worry that would carve its image on your brain and express itself in your face. The worrying mind actually generates calcareous matter in the brain and hardens the cells. You should fall asleep holding those desires and ideals uppermost in the mind, which are dearest to you, which you are the most anxious to realize, and the mind continues to work during sleep. These desires and ideals are thus intensified and increased. It is well known that impure thoughts and desires work terrible havoc then. Purity of thoughts, loftiness of purpose, the highest possible aims should dominate the mind when you fall asleep. When you first wake in the morning, especially if you've reached middle life or later, picture the youthful qualities as vividly as possible. Say to yourself, I am young, always young, strong, buoyant. I cannot grow old and decrepit, because in the truth of my being I am divine, and divine principle cannot age. It is only the negative in me, the unreality, that can take on the appearance of age. The great thing is to make the mind create the youth pattern instead of the old age pattern. As the sculptor follows the model which he holds in the mind, so the life processes reproduce in the body the pattern which is in our thought, our conviction. We must get rid of the idea embedded in our very nature that the longer we live, the more experiences we have, the more work we do, the more inevitably we wear out and become old, decrepit, and useless. We must learn that living, acting, experiencing should not exhaust life but create more life. It is a law that action increases force. Where then did the idea come from that man should wear out through action? As a matter of fact, nature has bestowed upon us perpetual youth, the power of perpetual renewal. There is not a single cell in our bodies that can possibly become old. The body is constantly being made new through cell renewal. The cells of those parts of it that are most active being renewed oftenest. It must follow that the age-producing process is largely artificial and unnatural. Physiologists tell us that the cell tissues of some muscles are renewed every few days, others every few weeks or months. The cells of bone tissues are slower of renewal, but some authorities estimate that 80 or 90% of all the cells in the body of a person of ordinary activity are entirely renewed in from 6 to 24 months. Scientists have proved beyond question that the chemistry of the body has everything to do with the perpetuation of youthful conditions. Every discordant thought produces a chemical change in the cells, introducing foreign substances and causing reaction, which is injurious to the integrity of the cells. The impression of age is thus made upon new cells. This impression is the thought. If the thought is old, the age impress appears upon the cells. If the spirit of youth dominates the thought, the impression upon the cells is youthful. In other words, the processes which result in age cannot possibly operate except through the mind, and the billions of cells composing the body are instantly affected by every thought that passes through the brain. Putting old thoughts into a new set of cells is like putting new wine into old bottles. They don't agree. They are natural enemies. The result is that 2-year-old cells are made to look 50, 60, or more years old, according to the thought. It is marvelous how quickly old thoughts can make new cells appear old. All discordant and antagonistic thought materially interferes with the laws of reconstruction and self-renewal going on in the body. And the great thing is, therefore, to form thought habits which will harmonize with this law of rejuvenation, perpetual renewal. Hard, selfish, worry, and fear thoughts and vicious habits of all kinds produce the appearance of age and hasten its coming. Pessimism is one of the worst enemies of youth. The pessimist ages prematurely because his mind dwells upon the black, discordant, and diseased side of things. The pessimist does not progress, does not face toward youth. He goes backward, and this retrogression is fatal to youthful conditions. Brightness, cheerfulness, hopefulness characterize youth. Everything that is abnormal tends to produce old age conditions. No one can remain young, no matter to what expedients he may resort to enable him to erase the marks of age, who worries and indulges in excessive passion. The mental processes produce all sorts of things, good or bad, according to the pattern in the mind. Selfishness is abnormal and tends to harden and dry up the brain and nerve cells. We are so constituted that we must be good to be happy, and happiness spells youthfulness. Selfishness is an enemy of happiness because it violates the very fundamental principle of our being, justice and fairness. We protest against it. We instinctively despise and think less of ourselves for practicing it. It does not tend to produce health, harmony, or a sense of well-being because it does not harmonize with the fundamental principle of our being. With many people, old age is a perpetual horror which destroys comfort and happiness and makes life a tragedy, which but for it might have been a perpetual joy. Many wealthy people do not really enjoy their possessions because of that awful consciousness that they may at any moment be forced to leave everything. Discordant thought of every kind tends to shorten life. As long as you think old, hard, grasping, envious thoughts, nothing in the world can keep you from growing old. As long as you harbor these enemies of youth, you cannot remain in youthful condition. New thoughts create new life. Old thoughts, canned, stereotyped thoughts, are injurious to growth, and anything which stops growth helps the aging process. Whatever thought dominates the mind at any time is constantly modifying, changing the life ideal, so that every suggestion that comes into the mind from any source is registered in the cell life, etched in the character, and outpictured in the expression and appearance. If the ideal of continual youth of a body in a state of perpetual rejuvenation dominates the mind, it neutralizes the aging processes. All of the body follows the dominating thought, motive, and feeling, and takes on its expression. For example, a man who is constantly worrying, fretting, a victim of fear, cannot possibly help outpicturing this condition in his body. Nothing in the world can counteract this hardening, aging, ossifying process, but a complete reversal of the thought so that opposite ideas dominate. The effect of the mind on the body is always absolutely scientific. It follows an inexorable law. There is a power of health latent in every cell of the body, which would always keep the cell in harmony and preserve its integrity if the thought were right. This latent power of health in the cell can be so developed by right thinking and living as to retard very materially the aging processes. One of the most effective means of developing it is keep cheerful and optimistic. As long as the mind faces the sun of life, it will cast no shadow before it. Hold ever before you, like a beacon light, the youth ideal, strength, buoyancy, hopefulness, expectancy. Hold persistently to the thought that your body is the last 2 years' product, that there may not be in it a single cell more than 1.5 years old, that it is constantly young because it is perpetually being renewed, and that therefore it ought to look fresh and youthful. Constantly say to yourself, if nature makes me a new body every few months, comparatively if the billions of tissue cells are being perpetually renewed, if the oldest of these cells are perhaps rarely, if ever, more than 2 years old, why should they appear to be 60 or 75? A 2-year-old cell could not look like a 70-year-old cell of its own accord. But we know from experience that the old age conviction can make these youthful cells look very old. If the body is always young, it should always look young. And it would, if we did not make it look old by stamping old age upon it. We Americans seem very adept in putting the old age stamp upon new tissue cells. Yet it is just as easy to form the youthful thought habit as the old age thought habit. If you would keep young, you must learn the secret of self-rejuvenation, self-refreshment, self-renewal, in your thought, in your work. Hard thoughts, too serious thoughts, mental confusion, excitement, worry, anxiety, jealousy, the indulgence of explosive passions all tend to shorten life. You will find a wonderful rejuvenating power in the cultivation of faith, in the immortal principle of health, in every atom of your being. We are all conscious that there is something in us which is never sick and which never dies, something which connects us with the divine. There is a wonderful healing influence in holding the consciousness of this great truth. Some people are so constituted that they perpetually renew themselves. They do not seem to get tired or weary of their tasks because their minds are constantly refreshing themselves. They are self-lubricators, self-renewers. To keep from aging, we must keep the picture of youth in all its beauty and glory impressed upon the mind. It is impossible to appear youthful, to be young, unless we feel young. Without realizing it, most people are using the old age thought as a chisel to cut a little deeper the wrinkles. Their old age thought is stamping itself upon the new cells, only a few months old, so that very soon they look to be 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old. Never allow yourself to think of yourself as growing old. Constantly affirm, if you feel yourself aging, I am young, because I am perpetually being renewed. My life comes new every moment from the infinite source of life. I am new every morning and fresh every evening because I live, move, and have my being in Him, who is the source of all life. Not only affirm this mentally, but verbally when you can. Make this picture of perpetual renewal, constant refreshment, recreation so vivid that you will feel the thrill of youthful renewal through your entire system. Under no circumstances allow the old age thought and suggestion to remain in the mind. Remember that it is what you feel, what you are convinced of, that will be outpictured in your body. If you think you are aging, if you walk, talk, dress, and act like an old person, these conditions will be outpictured in your expression, face, manner, and body generally. Youthful thought should be a life habit. Cling to the thought that the truth of your being can never age because it is divine principle. Picture the cells of the body being constantly made over. Hold this perpetual renewal picture in your mind, and the old age thought, the old age conviction will become inoperative. The new youth thought habit will drive out the old age thought habit. If you can only feel your whole body being perpetually made over, constantly renewed, you will keep the body young and fresh. There is a tremendous youth retaining power in holding high ideals and lofty sentiments. The spirit cannot grow old while one is constantly aspiring to something better, higher, nobler. Employment which develops the higher self, the frequent dwelling upon lofty themes and high purposes, all are powerful preservatives of youth. It is senility of the soul that makes people old. The life of living should be a perpetual joy. Youth and joy are synonymous. If we do not enjoy life, if we not feel that it is a delight to be alive, if we do not look upon our work as a grand privilege, we shall age prematurely. Live always in a happy mental attitude. Live in the ideal, and the aging processes cannot get a hold of you. It is the ideal that keeps one young. When we think of age, we think of weakness, decrepitude, imperfection. We do not think of wholeness, vigor. Every time you think of yourself, make a vivid mental picture of your ideal self as the very picture of youth, of health and vigor. Think health. Feel the spirit of youth and hope surging through your body. Form the most perfect picture of physical manhood or womanhood that is possible to the human mind. The elixir of youth, which alchemists sought so long in chemicals, we find lies in ourselves. The secret is in our own mentality. Perpetual rejuvenation is possible only by right thinking. We look as old as we think and feel because it is thought and feeling that change our appearance. Let us put beauty into our lives by thinking beautiful thoughts, building beautiful ideals, and picturing beautiful things in our imagination. I know of no remedy for old age conditions so powerful as love, love for our work, love for our fellow man, love for everything. It is the most powerful life renewer, refreshener, recreator known. Love awakens the noblest sentiments, the finest sensibilities, the most exquisite qualities in man. Try to find and live in the soul of things, to see the best in everybody. When you think of a person, hold in your mind the ideal of that person, that which God meant him to be, not the deformed, weak, ignorant creature which vice and wrong living may have made. This habit of refusing to see anything but the ideal will not only be a wonderful help to others, but also to yourself. Refuse to see deformity or weakness anywhere, but hold persistently your highest ideals. Other things being equal, it is the clearest, cleanest, purest mind that lives longest. Harmony, peace, and serenity are absolutely necessary to perpetuate youthful conditions. All discord, all unbalanced mental operations tend to produce aging conditions. The contemplation of the eternal verities enriches the ideals and freshens life because it destroys fear, uncertainty, and worry by adding assurance and certainty to life. Old age conditions can only exist in cells which have become deteriorated and hardened by wrong thinking and vicious living. Unrestrained passion or fits of temper burn out the cells very rapidly. People who are very useful, who are doing their work grandly, growing vigorously, retain their youthful appearance. We can form the habit of staying young just as well as the habit of growing old. Increasing power and wisdom ought to be the only sign of our long continuance on this earth. We ought to do our best work after 50 or even after 60 or 70. And if the brain is kept active, fresh, and young, and the brain cells are not ruined by too serious a life, by worry, fear, selfishness, or disease, the mind will constantly increase in vigor and power. If we are convinced that the life processes can perpetuate youth instead of age, they will obey the command, the fact that man's sin, his ignorance of true living, made the 80 years with the possible addition of 10 more, the average limit of life centuries ago, is no reason why anyone in this man-emancipating age should narrow himself to this limit. An all-wise and benevolent Creator could not make us with such a great yearning for long life, a longing to remain young, without any possibility of realizing it. The very fact of this universal protest in all human beings against the enormous disproportion between the magnitude of our mission upon earth and the shortness of the time and the meagerness of the opportunities for carrying it out. The universal yearning for longevity and all analogy in the animal kingdom all point to the fact that man was not only intended for a much longer life, but also for a much greater freedom from the present old age weaknesses and handicaps. There is not the slightest indication in the marvelous mechanism of man that he was intended to become weak, crippled, and useless after a comparatively few years. Instead, All the indications are toward progress into a large, completer, fuller manhood, greater power. A dwarfed, weak, useless man was never in the Creator's plan. Retrogression is contrary to all principle and law. Progress, perpetual enlargement, growth are the truth of man. The Creator never made anything for retrogression. It is contrary to the very nature of deity. Onward and upward is written upon every atom in the universe. Imagine the Creator fashioning a man in his own likeness for only a few years of activity and growth, and then retrogression, crippled helplessness. There is nothing of God in this picture. Whatever the deity makes bears the stamp of perpetual progress, everlasting growth. There is no going backward in his plans. Everything moves forward to one eternal divine purpose. A decrepit, helpless old man or woman is a burlesque of the human being God made. His image does not deteriorate or go backward, but moves forever onward, eternally upward. If human beings could only once grasp this idea, that the reality of them is divine, and that divinity does not go backward or grow old, they would lose all sense of fear and worry. All enemies of their progress and happiness would slink away, and the aging process would cease. The coming man will not grow old in appearance as he now does. The tendency of the race will be more and more towards perpetual youth. The time will come when people will look upon old age as an unreality, a negative, a mere phantom of the real man. The rose that fades is not the real rose. The real rose is the ideal, the idea which pushes out a new one every time we pluck the one that fades. The real man is God's ideal, and in the light of the new day that is dawning, man will glimpse that perfect ideal. He will know the truth, and the truth will make him free. In that new day, he will cast from him the hampering age-worn vestures woven in the thought loom of mankind through the centuries, and stand erect, the perfect being, the ideal man. That is Why Grow Old by Orison Swett Marden. I've been wanting to do an episode for a while on aging, and I think this is the perfect description of how I look at the aging process now that I understand the principles of reality creation. What if, for a second, imagine the ultimate conspiracy, that you started aging because you were tricked into it, that you're not supposed to age, that aging is just a thought construct. We do see people that get healthy all the time because of their aging, but this is a very tough one because we are programmed into this aging belief at youth, and we see it all around. So to create this youthful belief takes some work on your subconscious. It's been interesting. In recent episodes, I've discussed the law of one. In an interview with Aaron Abke, we were talking about back during the time of the pyramids, the big problem was that people only lived for 30 years. How are you going to spiritually grow in 30 years? 30 years is nothing. And guess what? 100 years is nothing. According to different manuscripts that I've read, in the next phase of consciousness, 90,000 years is the average time of life. That may sound like a lot, but not if there's so much more to the universe that we think. It's so easy to give up. My father, who was a veterinarian, retires. After my mom died, decided to retire in great health, thought he was doing great. And then I watched him slowly decline from the moment that he retired. And he had that age expectation. I remember saying, "Dad, you got the exercise bike in the garage. Why don't you just go in there and keep going?" And he said, "Well, I'm getting old and I don't need to do that anymore." Stopping exercise. How many people do you know in the growth process, in the aging process, that have suddenly stopped exercising because I'm getting old? It's just not true. If you break down your thought structure, all of them, you'll start to see all the things that make you believe that you're aging. You are not. And as we move into this new earth, perhaps we don't have to. You have light coming into you more and more that can make your body youthful and young. So I would recommend that you think these young thoughts. This is very, very good. I believe my favorite affirmation that was given was, and I think we should constantly affirm this, I am young because I am perpetually being renewed. You can just say that and that's enough. But say, I am young because I am perpetually being renewed. My life comes new every moment from the infinite source of life. I am new every morning and fresh every evening because I live, move, and have my being in Him who is the source of all life. It's beautiful, and I love that affirmation, and I definitely plan on using it. Now, of course, you're going to have the question, how old did Orison Swett Marden live till? So he lived to the age of 75, which back in 1924 is pretty impressive. But guess what? He retired from his magazine, and 2 months later, he was dead. I don't know if he was already sick when he retired, but I would be very interested knowing that he wrote this book and how he ultimately ended up dying, which I find interesting when I see discussions like this. I've always looked at the age of these New Thought authors. Most of them lived pretty long and had realized the power of their mind over their body. The most modern example of this research is found in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, where he is showing the power of the placebo effect and the way to use your mind to make yourself healthy and overcome major problems in the way that your body produces chemicals and habitually interacts with your brain. All of that is discussed in this. It's amazing that he wrote this 100 years ago. And this has been sitting here all along. This is gigantic if it's true that we have just been creating our own age and dying for no reason. Imagine that. Maybe there's a combination of things with it, but I will probably have Julia Rogers on sometime to interview her. She has done something amazing and looks younger. And I've met a few people like that are starting to look younger over time. And maybe this is something that you can do by right thought. Check out my meditation, the Bliss Body meditation. I have a sleep version and a waking version. And that is a meditation designed to go through your body and revitalize each of the cells to give you that access to source that you need while you sleep. It's very effective and powerful. And if you are sick, try that. Try to revitalize, rejuvenate your body and imagine it being replaced with brand new cells. It's what I call the Bliss Body. And it's amazing if you try that practice. You don't even need to do the meditation. Just go through in a slow manner the parts of your body and imagine pure source light going into it, imagine it being revitalized. That really works. But the interesting thing I've noticed, when I'm hanging out more with my kids, I feel more youthful. And when I'm not hanging out as much with my kids, it's completely different. Sometimes youth can be annoying in many ways, but there is a vitality and interest and energy in youth that is different. And sometimes you need to be around it and focus on it and think about it and try not to change those habits and patterns that you had from your youth just because you think you're getting old. For those of you out there that think you're struggling with aging, perhaps this will find you. And you should know that you're the one creating your aging. And it's going to be hard because you're unlocking major programming in your body. But what if we can? What if we can invite tachyon energy from time to rejuvenate our bodies? There's so many amazing possibilities that I have this feeling that everything will change. In my book, The Reality Revolution, the mind-blowing movement to hack your reality, I envision a future, if we can live long enough, in which technology and quantum computing reaches a point where we can completely live forever. Maybe we can get hit by a car, but the body itself can be rejuvenated and fixed forever. It's going to get better and better at it, and it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. And if we can live long enough, we can take advantage of this and even upload our consciousness into an AI if you think you need to do that. Obviously, we're already doing that anyway when we die. But it's possible to vastly live a longer life if you can live long enough now. But take away this thought that you're only meant to live a certain period of time, or that it's time to stop. And the thing I'm telling you, whatever your dream is, don't give up on that dream. There are so many examples of people that chose to do what they wanted and achieved their dreams at late times in their life, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. There is no time that is too late. Whatever it is your dream, if you want to write a book, if you want to make a video game, if you want to start a business, whatever it is that you want to do, don't look at your age as an excuse. It would be very easy to do that. I must be 20 to write that book, or make a song, or put out an album, or even try any artwork, whatever it is. I am begging you to replace that thought. Ask this question. If it's your choice, then why grow old? All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.